Arrests on the streets of Madagascar. At least 22 killed in anti-government protests, according to the UN. And 100 reported injured in clashes with security forces, all figures disputed by the country's government. Gen Z accuse those in power of failing to manage basic resources, blaming it for the economy and widespread poverty. And now, after weeks of protests, thousands, many of them students, gathered, calling for the president to step down, this time joined by part of the military. President Rajoelina was supposed to address the nation yesterday. Instead, he'd fled for his life. Reuters reporting he'd been flown out of the capital on a French military aircraft. It's not known where he is, but he put this on a Facebook live stream.
We have all seen that the crises that have occurred in the country have led to ruin and recession. There have been real plans since the 25th of September for a coup and assassination attempt against me.
On the streets of Antananarivo, they celebrated his departure, but also said accountability was key.
The
evacuation of Rajoelina was an act of interference by France in Madagascar. Why? Well, because it wasn't a coup d'etat. It was just a call from the people, a call for freedom of expression.
Une liberté d'expression.
Après ce qu'il a fait, je pense qu'il est préférable pour lui.
After what he did, I think it's best for him to leave Madagascar. But we're not going to let him go just like that. He has to be held accountable.
Il faut qu'il rende compte.
Rajoelina formed a political party back in 2007, presenting a campaign for youth-led politics after violent anti-government protests. After a coup, he was declared president in March 2009, at age 35, the youngest in the country's history. Ironically, it's now soldiers from an elite unit, CAPSAT, which helped him seize power in that coup, which are calling on troops to support protesters now. Last week he dismissed his cabinet and appointed a new prime minister, and confirmed today he's dissolved the National Assembly. And Radio France Internationale reporting that in leaving the former French colony, he'd also struck a deal with President Emmanuel Macron.
There is a lot of admiration and affection for a youth that has spoken out, that is politicized, that wants to live better, and that is a very good thing. They simply cannot be co-opted by military factions or foreign interference.
The anger, mostly from Gen Z, mirrors recent demonstrations in countries including Morocco, Nepal and Kenya against ruling elites, often using the skull and straw hat symbol from the Japanese manga series One Piece. For a digitally native generation, social media and the internet has been a driving force. The number of followers on this account alone doubling in the last 3 weeks. Many flights to Madagascar have been suspended while the turmoil continues, and security forces are working to maintain order. But many here see this as almost a second independence, and they will not give that up quietly.
On the island nation of Madagascar, a dramatic turning point is unfolding. What began as youth-led street protests over water and power outages has cascaded into a full-scale political crisis. The country's president, Andry Rajoelina, once considered firmly in control, now finds himself fleeing his country amid claims of military defection, elite soldier units turning their backs, and a generational uprising demanding change. This is not simply unrest. It may mark a fundamental shift in democratic control, power dynamics and generational politics in one of Africa's largest island states. The world watches as Madagascar enters uncharted territory. The unrest officially began on September 25, 2025, when thousands of youths took to the streets of Antananarivo, outraged by recurrent water shortages, electricity blackouts, and the cost of living. But deeper grievances lay beneath the surface: chronic poverty, systemic corruption, educational stagnation, and a sense that the government was unresponsive to Gen Z, the generation born in the early 2000s, digitally connected, politically conscious, and impatient for change. Protester organizations, some using the label Gen Z Madagascar, drew inspiration from other youth movements around the world, notably in Nepal and Sri Lanka, and mobilized via social media platforms, WhatsApp groups, and quiet tactical networks. In the capital, what had started as scattered demonstrations soon transformed into an urban wave. Protest squares filled, armored cars rolled, young people wearing masks and chanting "No more neglect." Despite attempts by the president to defuse it, dissolving government ministers, offering dialogue, the movement only grew stronger. According to the UN, at least 22 people have been killed and dozens injured. The stage was set for a confrontation between state power and a generation that refuses to wait. In many political crises, the tipping point comes when the security apparatus fractures. Such a moment arrived in Madagascar on the weekend of October 12th to 13th. The elite military unit known as CAPSAT, once fiercely loyal to President Rajoelina and instrumental in his rise in 2009, announced it would no longer obey orders to disperse protesters. In effect, the movement shifted from civilians versus government, two parts of the armed forces aligning with those civilians. In his late-night address, President Rajoelina acknowledged the reality. "I was forced to find a safe place to protect my life," he said. Simultaneously, reports emerged that armed forces had taken control of state broadcaster buildings, blocked television programming, and begun coordinated maneuvers with protest leaders. This turn of events marked a de facto power shift. The protesters, once vulnerable, now had crucial state support, at least symbolically. The government, once dominant, found its pillars cracking. In the corridors of power, the phrase began to circulate, "When the army walks away, the president walks away." On October 14, 2025, parliamentary deputies voted to impeach President Rajoelina. At virtually the same time, his whereabouts became unclear. Reports pointed to a French military plane evacuating him to a safe location abroad. The military announced that they were assuming control of the armed forces, dissolved institutions, such as the Senate, Constitutional Court, and Electoral Commission, and established a transitional council. International organizations swiftly responded. The African Union suspended Madagascar's membership, stating that the takeover constituted a breach of democratic norms. From the public's perspective, protesters cheered. After weeks in the streets, a sense of victory swept through Antananarivo. Yet, many also cautioned that a military takeover could replace one strong man with another. Madagascar now found itself in a constitutional vacuum, a president impeached, absent, a military committee in control, and the people's demands still echoing in the streets. Central to this story is the Generation Z movement. These are adults in their early 20s, digital natives, frustrated with older leadership and eager for change. In Madagascar, these young people organize with precision. Social media hashtags, encrypted chat groups, street assemblies, all underscored their resolve. The label Gen Z Madagascar became their identity. Their demands were concrete: resignation of the president, dismantling of corrupt institutions, an electoral commission freed from elite capture, and justice for youth unemployment and deteriorating public services. Youth activists recognized another truth: they needed more than protests, they needed legitimacy. The alliance with dissident military units gave them that doorway. Today, the youth movement is cautiously optimistic, but they remain vigilant, aware of being used or sidelined by new power brokers. For them, this is more than a protest. It is a generational stand that could reshape politics in Madagascar and possibly set a precedent across Africa. Madagascar is one of the poorest countries in the world, despite vast natural richness. For years, citizens have faced recurrent outages of water and electricity, intermittent public services, and limited access to quality education and employment. The protest wave tapped into these frustrations. One 22-year-old hotel worker told Reuters, "In 16 years, the president and his government have done nothing except enrich themselves while the people stay poor." Economically, Madagascar's economy has struggled to transform. Resource extraction continues to dominate, while manufacturing and technology sectors lag. Youth unemployment is high, the cost of living continues to rise. Politically, the long-term dominance of one political network fostered elite capture, nepotism, and lack of transparency. Many citizens believed the system served a few while neglecting the many. In this context, the protests were less of a surprise, more of a delayed eruption of long-simmering anger. When services failed repeatedly, legitimacy dissolved, and the streets became the arena of accountability. The international community responded swiftly. In Paris, President Emmanuel Macron expressed concern, but declined to confirm any French evacuation of President Rajoelina. In Washington and other capitals, analysts watched closely as yet another African nation entered post-constitutional transition. The African Union suspended Madagascar's membership, citing breach of democratic order. Travel advisories followed. The U.S. State Department issued a Level 3 travel warning over the protests, unrest, and security risk. Regionally, neighbors pondered the implications. If a youth-driven shakeup and a military takeover could topple the established order in Madagascar, what did that mean for other states? For the youth movement in Madagascar, this moment was embedded in a broader wave sweeping Africa and beyond, a new political consciousness demanding answerability, change, accountability. What lies ahead is uncertain, but the stakes are clear. 3 possible pathways emerge. Scenario A genuine transition. The military committee honors its pledge, dissolves institutions, installs a civilian government in 18 to 24 months, holds free elections, reforms take place. Scenario B, military consolidation. The armed forces maintain control behind a facade of democracy, youth and protest leaders sidelined, real reform limited. Scenario C, instability and regression. The transition falters, economic crisis deepens, protests return, regional isolation grows, and foreign influence exploits the vacuum. Which path Madagascar takes will depend on a mix of domestic negotiation, institutional strength, economic performance, and international engagement. For the youth of Gen Z, the question is personal: will this moment bring real structural change, or just another cycle of disappointment? Madagascar's story is also a story of a generation. Gen Z, globally linked, digitally fluent, ambitious, is no longer just part of the crowd, they are becoming the crowd. Across Africa and the world, young people question the old bargains, top-down leadership, external dependency, muted voice. In Madagascar, they acted, they marched, they stopped trusting. And when the state cracked, they stepped into the gap. If they succeed, the implications stretch far beyond Madagascar. Youth movements empowered, security forces responsive, new political contracts forged. If they fail, the warning is simple: protest without structural change can lead to revolution and reversal. Madagascar is at a crossroads. A relatively small island nation in the Indian Ocean has challenged entrenched power, witnessed its president flee, seen soldiers align with the people, and entered a moment of political suspension. The outcome is still unknown, but one thing is unmistakable: the norms of leadership, the power of youth, and the weight of legitimacy have shifted. For generations, change was promised. For this generation, change is demanded. The next pages of Madagascar's story will be written on the streets, in boardrooms, and in ballots, if they are held. And for the rest of Africa watching, this may not be a cautionary tale. It may be a signal: the era of silent consent is over. The era of generational voice has arrived.